Symbolic history through sight and sound, 31, 19th century, the loaded dream. Let an opening portrait pair span our theme, the perilous reshaping of two worlds, inner and outer. In Wilkie's 1805 Self, left, God affirmed inwardness, and rights of man outwardness arise together from the hopes of enlightenment. In Toulouse-Lautrec's 1880 Self, at 16, right, the backlash of such promise fires in both realms the crisis of modernity. Where first shall we take the pulse of what was leading in the arts, from transcendental assurance to symbolist estrangement, in politics, from constitutional debate to Marx and the anarchists? If the century of Berkeley and Brahms is the Romantic century, Baudelaire's Cimetière abhorré de la Lune, its stretch of spleen and ideal, aux serments, aux parfums, aux baisers infinis, makes it an insurgent hatching ground. That corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? But if romantic, a recurrent pole in man and art, is to designate a time, it cannot be in mere opposition to classical. Both Hölderlin and Nietzsche were prophet lovers of Greece. The most daring pre-symbolist of France, de Nerval, says the muse has made him l'un des fils de la Grèce. And from where else did Berkeley get his great god Pan down in the reeds by the river? Nor can romantic simply oppose realism. This swamp dappled with sun, with even its frogs and scarab, could not more imitate the visual. It is the classical theme, and realist body are possessed by some sensuous abandon of romantic soul. Shift to the revolutionary strand of the century. Daumier's realism, inspired by the socialist outbreak and brief republic of 1848. Chopin, a part of the musical build-up, with Berlioz, Liszt, early Wagner, the firebrand Verdi. In literature, Georges Sand, Lamartine and the rest, culminating in Victor Hugo, with his youthful definition of the romantic as nothing but liberalism in literature. Even Stendhal and Baudelaire, later amazed at their 1848 intoxication, all swept on a mounting wave of surge, reversal, more radical quest to affirm, as Shelley's first poetic championing of the proletariat after the massacre of Peterloo points down the century. Men of England, wherefore plough, for the Lords who lay ye low? Wherefore weave with toil and care the rich robes your tyrants wear? If we ask what Daumier's force shares with Berkeley's mood, it may give a clue to romantic soul, a tide of rising expectations, heightening touch and dream, wish, vulnerability, despair. It is the time loading of all physical and psychic bases. The romantic still carries that entire burden of articulated heart and world, as Keats bears the weight of Miltonic pentameter from Endymion, one faint eternal eventide of gems, to Hyperion, forest on forest hung about his head like cloud on cloud. And Baudelaire, even as he moves toward the modern, luxuriates in such visceral fullness. Mère des souvenirs, maîtresse des maîtresses, ô toi, tous mes plaisirs, ô toi, tous mes devoirs. whereas Mallarmé draws the plug which drains that voluptuous perfume of the blood, refines the forms to a hyaline shimmer, as Berkeley's explicit idyll yields to the innuendo of Douanier Rousseau's snake charmer. Huxley casts such a spell in his free translation of The Afternoon of a Faun. Between the reeds I saw their bodies gleam, who cool no mortal fever in the stream, crying to the woods the rage of their desire, and their bright hair went down in jeweled fire, where crystal broke and dazzled shudderingly. Et le splendide bain des cheveux disparaît dans la clarté et les frissons aux pierreries. Romantic had preferred the bases loaded, that we open all stops of the earth organ. Thus the tonal sob-yearnings of Brahms, even in the encroaching estrangement of the clarinet quintet. Against the dissolving tonalities of Ravel's 1903 quartet. Of course, the rhetoric of fullness the 19th century had to shed was the heritage from Baroque, with its proclaimed grandeurs of space, time, and cause, Leibniz. Therefore, each individual substance expresses the resolves which God made in regard to the whole universe. We grasp it in the light-flooded distances of Kuyp, the ground-bass tensities of a viola d'amore sonata, German, about 1670. From that heroics, much of the 18th century already lightens to the Bachlean and subjective, as in the Sons of Bach and early Haydn, here from the first quartet of Opus 20, or in such landscapes of sensibility as Norbert Gruntz, though, like Rousseau and Gray, wanders the hoary Thames along his silver winding way, this pre-romantic respects the court manners of Rococo. Certainly, as far as transcendental melting goes, the Baroque vapored to a veil. It attends the Kantian fruition of that idealism Berkeley had sowed, and to which this Friedrich, with Beethoven, Coleridge, a whole 19th century horizon are legatees. Schopenhauer, the world as will and idea. No truth, therefore, is more certain than that all that exists for knowledge, and therefore this whole world, is only object in relation to subject, perception of a perceiver, in a word, idea. The sea across which Friedrich's morning boats set sail is rayed through with the longing which Schelling's eternal one feels to give birth to itself. Such the ocean of Nietzsche's rapture, in whose seventh loneliness the silver soul fish swims from the bark, though that timeless love, for all the miscarriage of enlightenment and revolution, still clings to the tonal and spatial touch of earth. Romantic. From the same 3 centuries fix on night, 1647, Rembrandt's Rest on the Flight, with Paul Gerhardt's Evening Hymn. How the poem gleams in darkness, a sure life prayer. Nun ruhen alle Wälder. The woods are silent now. The stars golden glow in the blue halls of the sky. God give you quiet slumber. His gold bright angels render armed watch at your bedside. Stell euch die güldenen Waffen ums Bett und seiner Engel Schar. Another consciousness of ruins, lake, and moonlight broods over Wright of the 1780s, as over Claudius, whose Abendlied works mood variations on Gerhardt. Der Mond ist aufgegangen. The full moon has risen. Gold star points glisten over heaven clear and bright. The silent wood is shadowed. Breathing from the meadows, the mist comes strange and white. Der weiße Nebel, wunderbar. With Friedrich, as with Eichendorff's romantic hermit, the love of nature feeds the love of death. Comfort of earth, come, silent night. I weary of the blind daylight. The still, wide ocean darkens. Give rest, give ease of wish and want, until the dawn's eternal font through the dark wood sparkles. Komm, Trost der Welt, du stille Nacht, der Tag hat mich so müd gemacht, das weite Meer schon dunkelt, lass ausruhen mich von Lust und Not, bis das ew'ge Morgenrot den stillen Wald durchfunkelt. Novalis had turned from day to the comforting deaf mother leaned over the fevered child, as Poe would vulgarize it, quaff, oh quaff, this sweet Nepenthe. Hölderlin's evening fantasy, like Friedrich's twilight landscapes, or Schubert's Nacht und Träume, suffuses such earth dusk with infinite longing. Here by his cottage quiet in the shadow sits the ploughman, with the smoke of his hearth content. Near in the peaceful village the bell of evening kindly calls to the wanderer. Back now the seaman turns to the harbor's home. In far-off cities gently the market shrouds its bustling noise, while the still arbor gleams with the affable meal of neighbors. But I then wither. Do not all mortals live in reward and labor, with change of toil and rest, finding their joy? Why for me only then does the bitter thorn not slumber? Wohin denn ich? Es leben die Sterblichen von Lohn und Arbeit, wechselnd in Mühe und Ruhe ist alles freudig. Warum schläft denn nimmer nur mir in der Brust der Stachel? Against the dream radiance of Schinkel's Gothic, how stripped, how severe the old Gothic of faith, which has plumed such emulation. Heine, having been called a dismembered man, a divided soul, a Byron, wrote in 1829, complain rather that the world itself is split in the middle, for since the heart of the poet is the center of the world, it must at the present time be lamentably torn apart. Once the world was whole, in antiquity and in the Middle Ages. In spite of superficial struggles, there was always an inner unity, and there were integrated poets. We honor these poets and we rejoice in them. But every imitation of their unity is a lie that every sound eye penetrates. So Arnold at the monastery of the Grande Chartreuse, wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born, implores, take me cowled forms, and fence me round till I possess my soul again. But since Arnold's strange disease of modern life is in fact the fruit of Hegelian consciousness, why not celebrate its ripe introspection, what Coleridge most shares with the Germans? No cloud, no relic of the sunken day distinguishes the west, no long thin slip of sullen light, no obscure trembling hues. Come, we will rest on this old mossy bridge, which Victor Hugo distills in his early plays, Hernani. Regarde, plus de feu, plus de bruit, tout se tait. La lune tout à l'heure à l'horizon montait, tandis que tu parlais. Je me sentais joyeuse et calme, ô mon amant, et j'aurais bien voulu mourir en ce moment. Les biographes. True, the sun is beautiful. Its rays, the last, now set a crown on Taunus' brow. The river gleams, the forests take the fire. All nature is a flood of life and light. La nature est un flot de vie et de lumière. Though the cult Gothic of Coleridge's Christabel, Keith's Eve of St. Agnes, Schumann's Cathedral in the Rhine Symphony, in romantic fullness and repletion, is far from what it hungers after. Renaissance, Baroque, Transcendental have intervened. Runge's 1806 Christ on the Sea of Galilee shapes the world from subjectivity no less than Goethe's Faust or the rhyme of the ancient mariner. And the coming wind did roar more loud, and the sails did sigh like sedge, and the rain poured down from one black cloud. The moon was at its edge. The harbour bay was clear as glass, so smoothly it was strewn, and on the bay the moonlight lay, and the shadow of the moon. What is reached for is Schelling's primordial will. The primal longing moves like a surging, billowing sea, but there is born in God himself an inward, imaginative response, the first stirring of divine being in its still, dark depths. Schelling's birth out of darkness into light is no less of good from evil. The living word enters as a firm and enduring center in battle against chaos, and a declared state of war between good and evil continues to the present time, when God reveals himself as spirit, that is, as concrete actuality. That revelation is not purely a life motion. When Goethe made a poem of this Correggio rape of Ganymede, he gave it the dithyrambs of dissolving. I come, but where? Upward, upward. Clouds of the sky bend to me. Me, I am here, seizing, seized, all-loving Father, upward, on your breast. Mir, mir, umfangend, umfangen, aufwärts, an deinen Busen, liebender Vater. With such heart's wish, Proudhon stretches the Greco-Roman psyche and the style of Correggio. The surface is classical, but neither the vagabond soul of Chénier's loving Néard, nor Keats' Endymion glimpsing his goddess in dream cave or by plashing pool, has wagered more desperately on a thing of beauty is a joy forever. Against the satanic mills of actual flesh, a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue, those leaf-fringed legends of a Grecian urn, thou still unravished bride of quietness, that draught of vintage of a nightingale, thou wast not born for death, immortal bird, beat urgent wings. When Turner adds to classical subject, here Ulysses deriding Polyphemus, not only romantic heart, but a color play that turns whatever could be touched and seen to charmed magic casements, opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. Then, as in those field nocturnes, which inspired those of Chopin. Such life and hunger for life initiate a dissolving, as Turner's blind giant melts into cloud over rocks and sunset sea, which would run in art to Monet and Redon, in music to Debussy and Scriabin. What is the aim on Richter's Rhine crossing, or Schumann's Rhine, but to take as one the riches of earth and spirit, to foster both nostalgias of the finite and infinite, as with Mignon and the harper in Goethe's Wilhelm Meister. Do you know the land where lemon trees bloom? Kennst du das Land, wo die Zitronen blühen? Dahin, dahin, möcht ich mit dir, o mein Geliebter, ziehen. A point of departure for Eichendorff's post-horn and wanderers singing of the south, of statues and fountains by moonlight in summer gardens. Always the orchestrations of Todeslust, die Sonne funken sprühend im Versinken, gibt noch einmal der Erde Glut zu trinken. Always the soul flight of Mondnacht, and my soul spread her pinions wide in the kindred gloom, flew through the silent regions as if she flew toward home, als flöge sie nach Haus. Lamartine would suspend time's flight by returning alone to the lake where the two, boating in silence, had heard far off oars and the harmonious waves. Un soir, t'en souviens-t-il, nous voguions en silence. On entendait au loin, sur l'onde et sur les cieux, que le bruit des rameurs qui frappaient en cadence tes flots harmonieux. In Italy, Leopardi reels such earth loves over the infinite vanity of all, e l'infinita vanità del tutto. Never in history had soul and the ideal so seized on world and flesh. As Jung said, when Freud took off the psychic lid of Europe, he found the whole landscape flooded with sex. Moritz von Schwindt's rock-pooled mystery of midday, queer as Andersen's fairy tales, the red slippers, the snow queen. Those fish, like a Shakespearean pun, the bawdy hand of the dial upon the very prick of noon, around the hair-curtained form and reflection, dream overcharge the pubic mandala. So in Schumann's Frauenliebe und Leben. Though what Adler would find